Zachy Hassan is your host on this most epic journey through pop culture's past. Hold on to your butts. This is Nostalgia Theater.
Brought to you by the Movie Film Podcast.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Nostalgia Theater. This is Zachy, and I am so thrilled to intro my guest for this episode. He's been a fixture on our TV screens for the better part of the last 3 decades. I'm talking about Steven Weber, who many of us first came to know and love as Brian Hackett, who alongside Tim Daly as Brother Joe, ran Sandpiper Air on NBC's Wings for 8 seasons from 1990 to 1997. Since then, you've seen him regularly across the dial on shows such as Aaron Sorkin's short-lived Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, the 2012 Dallas remake, iZombie on CW, and as the devious Mayor Douglas Hamilton on NCIS New Orleans opposite Scott Bakula. Here he is, Steven Weber. Steven, thank you so much for coming on the show. As people have heard on the intro, I've been a fan of yours for basically as long as you've been on our screens, which is now, if we look at Wings as sort of the place that introduced you to a big chunk of the population, I mean, we're coming up on 30 years almost that you've been a regular presence on television.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think I started really 35 years ago when I got out of college in 83 or 84. I started working right away, and I did a few small things. I was on a soap. I was on As the World Turns. I did some theater in New York. But, yeah, I guess the widest exposure I had was starting in 89 with Wings. So, yeah, 30 years. Holy smokes.
So let's talk about that, because to me it feels like, certainly as a viewer on the outside looking in, it felt like Wings was sort of like the less loved stepbrother of Cheers.
Well, I guess in some ways you're right. I always viewed Wings as a reliable utility show that NBC had. It fulfilled its creative premise, and it did good business for the network. But did not ever have that kind of sexy, not credibility, but that kind of that sheen that other shows had at the time, whether it was Cheers or Friends or any other show that NBC had in its stable.
Yeah.
But I mean, it did have a wide audience. I mean, you might say that Wings on its worst night ratings-wise would be deemed a huge hit today, given the way numbers, given the way ratings are judged. And
8 seasons, I mean, that's no joke, you know?
No, and it was, at the time, one of a handful of shows that had run that long, for that length of time. I mean, I'm sure there are shows since that have gone on longer, but in the kind of old format of sitcoms, it was maybe in the top 10 or top 20 longest running shows.
And it really, I mean, it does feel like a bygone era, at least for me. I mean, obviously I have a great deal of nostalgic attachment to just the way NBC, their lineup was just, it was like power players. And to me, I mean, I include Wings in that because I wasn't paying attention to the broader media conversation, but I miss that because it feels like, I don't know, we don't get shows like these anymore.
Well, oddly, I feel like those days were, for as imperfect as they were in terms of wide choice, which is what is kind of emblematic of the media today. There's such a broad choice for people, for the viewing public. Yeah. It was in those days a little more unifying in a sense. It was appointment TV, right? And people did kind of gather around the TV set at certain times. More people did. The audiences were larger in the aggregate, I would say, per show than they are now. But yeah, look, I'm like you. I grew up with my opinions about TV having been formed from watching TV in the 60s and 70s, which was a holdover from television in the 50s.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was watching not only I Love Lucy, but all sorts of old, even kinescopes were on. I mean, when I was a kid and I was glued to the television far too much as a child, I was watching, you know, stuff that were reruns from, like I said, the 50s, even things that nobody's heard of anymore, like Ding Dong School. You know, these were like there was morning programming that they were just repeating that were old black and white shows, and I kind of grew up on the structure of sitcoms and all those, and as I think you're referring to, yeah, it is a bygone era. They don't do it quite the same way now, although I think they attempt to, and for some reason are afraid to kind of fully commit to those old style sitcoms. I think it's more of kind of like a hit and run, like get in, do a quick joke, and get the hell out, get to the next scene quickly. And,
right.
You know, even good shows. You know, I think the show that comes closest though is a show that I've been on recently called Mom, which takes the time. You know, it takes the time to not just do a kind of a block and shoot, quick in, quick out. They take the time to examine subject matter comically and also seriously, and they give more time to scene development and also the chance for an audience to develop an attachment to the story and to the show, which a lot of other television shows don't do anymore.
It does kind of feel like Chuck Lorre is sort of single-handedly keeping traditional sitcoms afloat.
I mean, that could be the case. Obviously, it depends on what your taste is, because his shows run the gamut, you know, from Two and a Half Men to Young Sheldon and everything in between. You could say that he's versatile as hell, but while doing what you described. I mean, he is giving weight to this format. And while other shows are exploring it differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talking about your background, I mean, you said you had appeared on soaps and things like that. Was your inclination always? Did you have a leaning towards comedy? Because to me, when I see you on Wings, I think what sticks out to me is just you're just so good at it. I mean, it's still so funny, and obviously that's the writing, but it's also the performance.
Well, thanks. I didn't start off trying to be a comic actor. I just sort of found my way to Wings. I had done some serious things, but in my life, I tend to be more driven by comic, intentions and stuff. So I guess I found my way there. The fun thing about Wings is that it especially after having been on the air so long, I guess it establishes an expectation in the audience of who these actors are supposed to be. And so I had a reputation for, I guess, being a comic actor during Wings and afterwards. But the irony is that I've been in very few comedies since. I've been mostly cast as douchebags in suits. And,
I was going to say you've got you found a niche as like the heavy.
Kind of weird, and I've spoken to my shrink about it. I'm saying, why am I playing all these dicks, these horrible guys? And she says, like, well, look, it's better to play one than to be one. But I've found my way into this category, and I don't mind it. As well as having watched a lot of old television, I'm a big kind of classic movie fan, and always gravitated towards the actors who played the heavies repeatedly, or the anti-heroes, characters that tended to be a little darker. Yeah. And I don't think it hurt Boris Karloff to be associated with playing scary, quote unquote, characters. On the other hand, I have been of late playing some nicer guys, which is makes me feel good. But look, it's fun, you know, and it serves a purpose. And on the basest level, it's a living, you know, and so I'm happy to do it.
So on Cheers, that's on Cheers. Excuse me, on Wings. See, again, to me, the shows are just linked in my head.
Well, they are. I got to tell you also. I hope you don't mind me just talking about myself. But this is my opportunity.
Please do
to do this. You know, when we were shooting Wings in the early seasons, Cheers was 2 stages up. Literally it was on the same street that we shot in Paramount, and I would go hang out with the guys and gals of Cheers, you know, when they were at their height.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. I could just wander over every time I wanted to sit in on rehearsals or play foosball with Woody or hang out with Ted, you know, and all those things. And it was really exciting, I have to say. So look, they are linked, and obviously they share writers. The writers who worked on Cheers went on to develop, create and develop Wings.
That's
so
right, and later Frasier, yeah.
That's right. They're and beyond that, Modern Family, and Just Shoot Me, and all those guys. You know, because Chris Lloyd and Steve Levitan worked on.
That's right.
On Frasier and Wings and all that stuff. So a lot of these shows are connected in interesting ways.
Yeah, I actually just on my show last month, I had Fief Sutton on as my guest, and we were reminiscing about you know, because he was running Cheers for a big chunk of that, and it's, you know, it just as somebody who grew up in that era, it's funny because I teach media classes, and I try to explain the whole that era, the must-see TV era, and when Cheers was ending, and just what it was like. I mean, it was like this cultural moment, and, you know, just going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's like these kids, and they're not even kids, I mean, they're like 18, 20, it's just completely outside of their frame of reference. The idea that a show could end and it like the world stops to acknowledge the passing of a show.
It's fascinating. I guess in years to come we'll be able to analyze the kind of the culture, and in a way that it's hard for me, I know personally, to really figure out the pros and cons of such a change. But you know, like, a change is inevitable, I suppose.
Yeah. So on Wings, I always ask this whenever I have you know, members of an ensemble on. At what point did you guys kind of realize this is working? We've found a rhythm here, and it seems to be good what we have here.
I'd like to believe that we began to realize that. I don't know, by the second or third season. I think we were all still pinching ourselves that we were on anything that was good enough, and that was continuing on.
Sure.
You know,
that you were in a second or third season.
Exactly. That we'd made it that far. And even in our later seasons, you know, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, I even think we didn't take it for granted then. And maybe that's a comment on us as individuals or as an ensemble, or maybe it was instilled in us by the network or the producers of the show to not get too cocky or too expectant, if that's a word, expectant. That means, I guess, we're pregnant. Not to just take it all for granted that we're a show and we're doing really well. But I think the show began to hit its stride just rhythmically, probably around the 3rd or 4th season.
Okay.
Because anytime I look at the old shows, especially in the first season or so, it just seems so broad. The writing was there. I think the acting took a little time to settle down. Maybe I'm talking more about myself than anybody else.
Sure.
But we definitely did hit a rhythm in terms of as an ensemble and as individuals. I guess the later seasons the show got into, where there is a real ease and relaxation in the writing and performing.
Yeah, and definitely, you know, by the time Tony Shalhoub became regular, and I mean, you really it felt like the ensemble had fully gelled by then, in terms of, like, it was like he was this missing piece. That added something really important.
I mean, the interesting thing also about the show and about the writing, to me, is that it hasn't really become dated.
No.
It's not, and there are shows in the same years that we shot Wings that have a kind of a dated feel to them. There's something about the writing that makes it almost evergreen.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. I don't exactly know why. And it just gives truth to the idea that if something is funny, it's funny, no matter from whence it comes or from what era it emanates. And, I mean, I can watch Laurel and Hardy now and get convulsed. And I guess similarly, I'm not comparing Wings to Laurel and Hardy, but the whole idea that if something is funny, it's purely so, and so accessible to any generation. That seems to be the case. People are watching Wings for the first time, so I'm told, and getting a huge kick out of it.
Well, I can speak to that because just now, as I was getting ready to set up, I was telling my wife, "Oh, I gotta do an interview." And my son, who's 11, he's like, "Who are you interviewing?" And I'm like, "Oh, Steven Weber. He's Brian on Wings." And he's like, "No way!" My 11-year-old. So it's
smart, wonderful kid.
we because I'm watching Deep Space Nine with him, and I didn't realize you were on Deep Space Nine.
I mean, just for what was it like? It was like a double episode or something. Yeah, I was always a huge Trekkie, and they shot that on the lot, and I think I begged Junie Lowry, who's the casting agent,
right?
And, please, let me just do something. Just let me hold a tricorder somewhere, or I don't. And they made me this Bajoran, which is a character that has a ridged bridge of the nose, which
That's
I
right.
think is used for grating nutmeg during their Christmas season. Their version of Christmas. The Bajoran
That's right.
Christmas.
Bajoran Christmas.
Bajoran Christmas, very different.
A lot less snow.
Less snow, and it's not a manger; it's a black hole. I mean, it's the whole thing. It's very complex. Yeah.
Well, can you talk about your relationship with Tim Daly on the show? I saw you guys. You appeared on his web series that he does,
where I get killed.
Yeah,
I die.
And I saw that, notwithstanding the killed part. But I was like, well, I think they're still close because otherwise he wouldn't do this. And I'd like to believe that Joe and Brian Hackett got along with each other.
Yeah, we had a great time and are still close. I mean, he lives on the East Coast doing his great show and doing all that. But every time I'm in New York, we hang out and we're in contact in many ways the way brothers are, siblings are. We had a great time together on the show. And, you become a de facto family after 7 or 8 years. And there are ups and downs and little glitches here and there, but we absolutely maintained a good, positive, fun, brotherly relationship on and off the set. He's a great dude. He really is.
The timing and chemistry that you guys have in some. I was just last week I was watching an episode. It's where the coach who tormented you guys, he passes away.
All right.
And
we put lipstick on him.
You put the lipstick on him, and so you're you turn the office and you're ragging on how you don't realize he died, and then Crystal Bernard's he died, and you're in the middle of this dance, and then you suddenly stop, and I can't even describe it, but I've seen this a million times. I'm sitting there watching it with my wife, and we just bust out laughing out loud, which I think says something to what you're saying. It is timeless comedy. It's not rooted in the politics of the day. I think of something like Murphy Brown, which is a great show, but that's the inherent problem with a show like that, right? Is
agreed. Yeah, it's of its time and important. But Wings, in a way, except for the odd fashion faux pas, in my case, the big puffy shirt and the tie
shirts.
and all that crap, But eventually, we even said. Not we. I mean, wardrobe eventually said, "Oh, the hell with that." Let's just forget it. Let's just put them in clothes that they feel good at wearing, and so maybe that helped. But also online is there's some seasons of Wings bloopers. I don't know if you've ever seen that. But
no, I haven't.
They're hilarious, and if you really want to see us having fun, and me and Tim laughing our guts out and making fun of each other, that's the place to do it. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Just you can, I think, Google Wings bloopers or something. There's about 4 seasons of them, and I've watched them, man, and they're hilariously funny. And we really did have a great time. We really did have fun. And when Tom Church, when he was on the show, we had endless laughing, and almost to the point where we were being yelled at by people. We really had a lot of fun, And of course, it wasn't just us as schmucks messing around. It was supported by the writing and the situations in which we found ourselves, in which they put us in. I mean, if it was bad writing, we wouldn't be having as much fun.
Well, and when we talk about the cast, and I don't know if there's something you can talk about, but I've always wondered, I mean, why did Farrah Fawcett leave in what felt like a very sudden way?
Yeah, I actually don't know. I don't know. I think maybe she could be wrong here. I think maybe she got sick of it, and to the reason why I say that is because I think she's living in Texas or something, and I think she just wanted to try something different in her life. Might have been that. I really don't know.
Yeah.
But like I say, I mean, things develop, and while we are the family, there are it's not like we know every facet of the situation, and also there's a business aspect to the so-called family, and there's ambitions, and there's desires that are fulfilled and unfulfilled, professionally speaking, and people make changes and move on. I mean, that's what Tom Church did. I mean, he made a decision to leave the show and forge a different path away from Wings, and that's of course his prerogative. And inarguably he was successful in the pursuit of that. I mean, he's got a great career,
no doubt. Yeah.
But and yet he's when I meet people, he's beloved as Lowell.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something that he wishes to embrace. I've never heard him speak on it, but he was unique and hilarious, and contributed again to the success of the show.
And it's very funny because when you look at Woody Harrelson on Cheers and Thomas Church on Wings, they were playing very much a similar archetype.
Yeah.
And it's here we are decades later, and both of them are the great, some of the great living actors, and I think that's, it's extraordinary.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I find in television that gets made today is that it, let me backtrack. A lot of people didn't realize how versatile, Woody Harrelson ended up being.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he played the kind of lovable lunkhead.
Yeah.
Same arguably with Tom Church, kind of a dummy, kind of a funny, archetypal, dopey character. These are actors who have such versatility, and variety in their ability to create characters and to say roles. People weren't aware of it back then. Now I think it's easier to see actors become versatile. I watch a show. Well, I'm on the show now called Get Shorty, and which is you can find on Epix, which is if you can find it. I mean, damn it, it's a great show. It's hard to find. And it's with Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd and other actors on the show who are amazing, and are examples of what is, I guess, fairly or unfairly called oh my God.
Well, like
diversity casting, or right?
Yeah.
These are actors who would have been relegated to playing kind of crappy roles or servile roles, who are among the most versatile diversity casting. They're the most versatile, nuanced, beautiful actors you'll ever see.
Yeah.
They're not just going to play thugs, or they're not just going to play maids, or they're not going to play. You know what I mean? They are amazing actors, and so that's something that people forget that they don't know, that the lunkhead they're seeing is also capable of playing Macbeth.
Yeah.
Anyway, the long-winded.
No, I think it's
tirade.
very apt, actually, because it actually dovetails into a question I wanted to ask about your own sort of transition away from comedy, which was doing The Shining, and that was right at the tail end of Wings. I remember hearing at the time that they were remaking The Shining, which I was like, what, are you kidding? And then hearing that you were going to be in it, and I was like,
Are you doubly kidding?
Yeah, well, I'm not, and I'm coming at this as a fan. I just didn't understand what the approach was.
Yeah.
So first
That's
of
like
all,
Wally Cox is being cast as Conan.
well, I'm not going to say that because I love the miniseries. I think it's fantastic, right? So my impression as like a high school junior was completely, I knew nothing. I admit that fully.
Right.
But I want to ask you because, I mean, obviously you knew what the sort of the loftiness that the original Shining was held in. So was it a little bit like, just I'm gonna roll the dice on this? Were you afraid of having to be measured against the most Nicholson of Nicholson performances?
That's saying a lot because a lot of his performances are extremely Nicholson.
Yeah, he dialed up the Nicholson.
He sure did. As I remember it, I was kind of strangely unaware and unaffected by any potential comparison beyond a superficial one. In other words, I had this opportunity and seized it and really didn't think about any kind of issues having to do with the show being compared to the Kubrick movie, of which I was a huge fan and still am. And maybe this was actually to my detriment, to be truthful, because as I look back on what I did at The Shining, just in terms of my character and my acting, it was that lack of awareness that didn't help me. In other words, I wasn't mature enough to play that role, and I wasn't as an actor, as a person. I just didn't grasp what it was really truly about.
Wow.
I was enamored with the idea of the supernatural, and I loved the monster aspect of it all, the terror. But really, years later, it occurred to me, it's really about alcoholism. It's about a deeper, darker, more personal kind of a horror, and not about monsters. And I felt like I was playing it more about the monsters in retrospect.
That's interesting.
But I think the whole, and obviously, well, not obviously, but you probably know the whole reason why it was remade. It was remade in order to appease Stephen King, and his fans, his faithful following, who saw in the Kubrick film a departure, and not a well-loved one from his fans. They wanted something that was faithful to the story, that was more literal, and so he took it upon himself to write this script and be very hands-on and deliver what he hoped would be a more faithful interpretation of the book. And I think on most levels it delivered. I think, however, and I have to start with my own performance, that I wish I'd been better, because then I think I would have fulfilled his aims more thoroughly. Stephen King's, it is.
To me, it's fascinating to hear you say that, because, and I'm not even just saying this because I'm on the phone with you, but I mean that watching you in that was where I was like, man, Steven Weber is capable of a lot more than just making us laugh. Like, to me, that knocked the doors off of what I was, just what I expected when I saw you on the screen.
Well, thanks. I mean, look, I certainly had ample opportunity to go in a lot of directions with that particular role, and look, I think I hit some points well. But, look, Stephen King I think it's difficult to bring his stuff to screen.
Yeah.
It's only worked a few times, really, in my opinion. I think the recent movie version of It was really great.
Yeah.
I think even the original TV version of it was good, but a little dated. I mean, and it's hard to get his stuff, which is meant to be read and felt, and it's meant to stew in your brain and stir around, and that's the terror. It's hard to literalize it, and that's my opinion anyway.
Sure. But it had to make you feel pretty good that the man who created Jack Torrance saw you as the realization of what he wanted to see on the screen.
Well, it didn't make me feel pretty good. It made me feel great, and of course, there's a lot of affirmation that comes with that. I used to love that he was around, and he was such a cool guy. A living author who kind of lives up to your expectations of what they would be. I mean, there was one time when, first of all, we all lived. Well, most of the cast and crew lived at the Stanley Hotel where we shot it, which was the original inspiration for his story, for King's story. And there are a lot of accounts of the hotel actually being haunted, and it was, and probably still is, a very creepy place. There's weird energy there. Anyway, we were shooting, and I was reading the book, The Shining, as we were going along, and there was one passage in it that I loved. I just loved the poetry of it. It was like a little couplet, and the couplet was like, Medoc, are you here? I'm sleepwalking again, my dear. The vines are moving under the rug, or something like that. And I was reading it, and I thought, what is this? What? Because it came in the middle of this long kind of narrative speech, and it was abstract and strange and kind of beautiful. And I said, wait, Stephen King is downstairs. I'm going to ask him. This is great. I go downstairs, and there he is. He's tall, he's bespectacled, and he's always got books in his arms. He's everything from the Tibetan Book of the Dead to, Gent, and everything in between. It was like he just devoured everything. I said, Steve. He goes, yeah, what? I said, what does this mean? And I said, Medoc, are you here? I'm sleepwalking again, my dear. The vines are moving under the rugs. And he goes, oh, okay, Medoc. Well, Medoc's a wine. I was just probably drinking wine. I was drunk down a lot of times. So let me see. Medoc, you're sleepwalking again? Yeah, sleepwalking. Yeah, because when you drink wine, it's hard to sleep. And, okay, vines are moving on the rugs. I probably looked down, and there was a vine pattern on the rug. Okay, got to go now. And that was it. And he kind of walked away, and I was both thrilled and disappointed that particularly beautiful passage didn't have the depth that I'd fantasized that he would tell me. He said, well, this is what happened. And it just pointed out how actually human and accessible he was, which was part of the joy of doing that whole show.
That's amazing. So
a big Stephen King story.
That you know what? Like, you have a Stephen King story, which is
I got a Stephen King story.
You're part of a very select fraternity there,
That's right.
So I need to ask, because I feel like I'm part of speaking of being part of a select fraternity, I'm part of the select fraternity that watched regularly Cursed, a.k.a. The Weber Show.
Christ.
And your name was on the title for a portion of that. What the hell happened?
What the hell happened? This is what happened. I met with these two really funny, cool writers, and as happened in those days, if you had done a series, it was possible that you could transition to another one, and blah, 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 and you get a deal at a network and all this stuff, and or a studio. And I happened to get a deal with Mike Ovitz, who is the head of this thing called AMG.
Yeah.
And AMG was his new firm after CAA, I guess. And they were producing and developing and representing. The whole thing was a pretty big operation, so that was very heady. And anyway, I met with these writers, and we bounced. We had some ideas. They had some ideas. And then they had one that was basically, they call it Cursed. I said, well, what's that about? It says, basically, it's just a guy wakes up, steps in dog crap. That's his show. That's his day. There's nothing supernatural about it. It had a lot. In a way, it was almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's just a guy that gets into trouble and has characters, and there wasn't going to be any big deal about it. I said, I think that sounds kind of funny. It could be slapsticky, it could be weird, it could be Seinfeldian, it could be any of those things, and it didn't restrict itself to any kind of formula. And that's what that's what it started out as being.
Wow.
What it developed into was, in many ways, out of fear. The network was concerned that it wasn't strong enough, that title was weird, that immediately it put a bad spin on it. It's cursed, you know. Maybe we should literalize it. Maybe we should put a curse in it. And so me and the producers and the writers who just really wanted to get a show on the air and I guess listened as much as we could to the people who had been in charge of great shows, good TV. We said, oh, okay, and you know, Jimmy Burrows and all those people, and we just sort of said, okay, let's see what happens. And it ended up being a bit of a mess. You know, it was just not handled well at the end of the day by any of us. I mean, really, in retrospect, I should have said no to all of it. You know, and it's a bit vague, and it kind of supposes that I had all this power. I mean, my name was on it, and that was scary. The whole thing was scary, but it shouldn't have been. You know, Chris Elliott was in it, Wendell Pierce, Amy Peets, you know, Paula Marshall. There was some
what a cast!
Excellent,
oh, fantastic!
Yeah, it was good. You know, redoubtable performers. It was just a bit of a mess, and there you have it. You know, that was it. It was it got kind of, what's the word, Bowdlerized, or it got manipulated. It eventually lost its simple genesis and became, you know, its simple roots, and became just a kind of a mishmash.
I remember because like I said, what I remember most about that fall is that you and Tim Daly were both on shows, like brand new shows at the same time, because he was doing The Fugitive at the same time.
Oh, that's right.
Which is another
also
great show that didn't last.
Well, didn't last. You know, I don't know. Look, it's there's a symbiosis that happens between the audience and the creative entities, you know, and they come together, you know, and sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah. Listen, also, as I recall, the same season as Cursed was Hank Azaria. Hank Azaria had a show.
Yes, that's right.
That I don't think ever aired, and yet it was being promoted. I could be wrong. And in which he played multiple characters.
Yeah.
Now, that's a home run to me. Hank Azaria, multiple characters. And I think he saw the writing on the wall and pulled away. And in some respects, I wish I had, but I guess I didn't have his wherewithal. Look, it is hit or miss. Obviously, you know that. And like, there are shows. I did a show called Studio 60.
You just segued right into that for me.
There you go. But it was an imperfect show.
Yeah.
But absolutely should have been given another season or two to work out those imperfections, because the things that worked about the show were fantastic, in my opinion.
So Studio 60, I mentioned I teach media class. I actually show the pilot episode in the TV unit, because I'm like, here's good TV about making TV, and it's all very meta, and I'm very proud of myself. I pat myself on the back. But what I love is that, because I have to show it with the captions, and there's a bit, it's in the pilot, where Amanda Peet says something to you, like, I can't find my office or something, and you do this thing where you kind of click your tongue, and I only know that because it says that in the caption. It says clicks tongue.
Clicks tongue.
And I said, that's a performance that transcends the screen, that it must be put in it has to be immortalized in the captions.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Tongue click. Yeah, look, that was, again, a show that was beautifully written and written with TV in mind. You know, it didn't try to break TV or reinvent it. I think Aaron used every resource that TV offered at the time, and still potentially does. And you know, he's a big fan of the Movie Network, which I am, and everybody was on the cast, and he had something to say. But again, the atmosphere turned problematic, in my opinion. Critics were gunning for him after his colossal success, not only movies and stage, but obviously West Wing.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I sensed. It was the equivalent of people waiting to criticize a baby just as it's being born, and then once it's born, they're saying, "Well, what's the matter? It's not talking. It's not walking. It's a failure. This baby is needs to be sent away." And they didn't give it time, and I feel like it kind of rattled everybody. There was it was the anti-West Wing feel. It was very tough. Look, this is just subjective. I'm sure a lot of it had to do with money too, because money is a huge component in television, whether it's great television or shitty television, and so maybe it was too expensive. Not that any of the actors were even big actors, Matthew Perry et al., Bradley Whitford, nobody was making their big salaries that they had been established in previous shows. We were all working to work with Aaron Sorkin and do this great show. And I think that in some ways the atmosphere rattled the writers, may have indeed rattled Aaron. I mean, he could say, "No, that's not it, Stephen." But from where I sat, it felt like that. It felt like it was a difficult environment to create a show of such complexity. It was difficult.
Do you feel like, and maybe this is again just a subjective opinion, but do you feel like there was a disconnect between audiences' expectations when you say Aaron Sorkin, you're thinking West Wing, because Sports Night, people had, it was a beloved show that not many people watched, right? So you have West Wing, which is like, we're talking about important things. We have important people talking about important things, and then it's like, and now here's a show about making a TV show, and is that just not something your lay audience member, notwithstanding people who have an interest in that, in the craft of TV production, would have necessarily found that into? Well,
I would say that's not necessarily the case, because TV audiences have become accustomed to the backstage workings, at least as how they're portrayed on television by shows like Larry Sanders or what else? Anything else that comes to mind? It's not coming to my mind. But in other words, people do have an understanding. I think, however, expectations were very high for the show to have that kind of gravitas that West Wing had. And at the end of the day, doing a TV show isn't as grave as running a country. Although I could make some jokes about what's going on today with our administration, but at the time that wasn't the case. And
they're treating running the country like it's running a TV show.
That's right, and it's just it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I guess you could say, and that's proven by the opposite, which is you can't write a TV, you can't make a show about a television and make it seem like it's about running a government. Anyway, and so in a way, it could have afforded an opportunity for Aaron maybe to shake things up and to do things differently. I mean, the centerpiece of Studio 60 was the eponymous Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip show, which was a Saturday Night Live show, which was supposed to be a work of comedic genius, and I'm not sure that element of our show was functioning well. Very few of the bits themselves were hilariously funny, and that was not lost on the audience or critics. They kind of they sunk their knives and forks right into that. This is supposed to be funny. This is supposed to be a comedy, the meta portion, and it ain't funny. So that was part of it. And there were a lot of things that were assumed that just didn't come to pass. It was assumed that audiences would immediately gravitate and fall in love with, say, the main quartet of characters, and immediately identify with their interactions. I'm not sure that was the case. And oddly, what people seem to like, I'm not just saying that because it involves me, was the kind of outer circle story involving the machinations of the corporations and television foreign sales and the kind of the geopolitics of cursing on the air during a news program and stuff like that, which was kind of prescient in a way. That's what people responded to more than I think the centerpiece of the show. Again, that's my opinion. That's what I've heard. And that was fascinating. It just was kind of written, I think, with a lighter touch. The light, the spotlight was off that area of the show, and it was more focused on Aaron and his personal life, and everything that happened in his personal life found its way into the scripts. And it was just it was too difficult at the end of the day. I think I could be all wrong.
Well, I mean, one thing. First of all, I think everything you're saying is apt, and it occurs to me. I mean, this was a cable show before the.
Absolutely.
I mean, if it was on AMC or whatever, it would have been, it would have had the full 7 seasons or whatever.
You're right.
It was just before its time, but I mean, from your experience working in the industry, did you feel it was an accurate reflection of what went on? I mean, just from your description of what happened on Cursed.
Interesting. Well, the thing about that I don't think was wholly accurate was the gravitas about making a show.
Sure. Wow.
It's generally speaking, it's fun to work on a comedy. I have worked on a couple since Wings, and in the last several years, which shockingly were not fun to work on, and that was odd. That's an anomaly. But for the most part, the writers' room is freaking hilarious. And there's all sorts of, and that was not portrayed. It was portrayed like the newsroom during Watergate. Like on All the President's Men. It was it was tough in there, but yeah, I mean, I think you make an interesting point comparing the politics of Cursed with Studio 60. There's things that go on that were portrayed accurately. But again, I suppose you could have told that story with perhaps a lighter touch, without so much, without the intention of moving the audience. It's like tectonic plates, move this, and maybe it wasn't necessary. In some respects, I think the show needed more time to earn what it justifiably would have earned, which is respect from the audience and from the critics and everything. We would have found ourselves. But sometimes there's no time. Sometimes people freak out.
That's it's. I've often said as a critic and just a viewer, one of my joys is sitting down and watching actors recite Aaron Sorkin's dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, we all worked like hell. There was no slacking, and you could not slack. Every ellipsis, every comma was to be spoken. And
it's like Shakespeare. Don't improvise it.
Well, it is, and look, and some TV and some dialogue and some writers are absolutely open to the kind of collaborative paraphrasing, unless it's completely awful. I mean, if you miss a word here or there, or if it fits your mouth differently to use ain't as opposed to aren't, then do it. But in this case, it's as close to that kind of exact meter that one observes in Shakespeare or poetry. Aaron and his writers, for that matter, in the writers' room, work really hard to craft their ideas, and so it behooves any actor to respect that and do it. In fact, I really think it was great and very unifying at how every one of the actors, and there were quite a few actors who had established careers on their own, jumped into this ensemble, and on the strength of their commitment to the material, was able to bring the best out of the material as it was written, as it was given to them. I mean, it was and almost like a football team or something. You can't have a bunch of players doing their own thing. That each one of them has a discipline, and they fulfill their discipline. That's what we did as an ensemble. It was very exciting, actually, I have to say.
Did they come to you with the role, or was that something that you pursued?
No, I auditioned for originally auditioned for one of the roles, either played by Brad Whitford or Matthew Perry.
Oh, no kidding! Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people obviously auditioned for those roles. I believe everybody read for them. I'm sure they had actors in mind, but after I did read one of the roles, I asked Aaron and Tommy Schlamme to read the role of Jack Rudolph, and they said, "Really? Why?" And they immediately assumed that I only wanted to have a lead.
I see.
It's the lead or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not where I came from. That's not what I like I said earlier, I love character actors. I like supporting players. That's what I always kind of gravitated towards. And I said, no, there's something about this guy. And I read it. And it really tumbled out of my mouth in a much more, in a really natural way. Maybe that began my slide into playing these suited characters.
I feel like that might be patient zero, and then we can sort of.
That might be it. That really might. It's true. Might be it. And in many ways, it was the best of them. Because it was, he was a prick. Kind of a corporate tool. Who had ethics, and who's a company man who believed in the almighty dollar, but also believed in, the constitutional freedoms of expression and
it's such a Sorkin character, my gosh.
It's such a Sorkin character, but you know what? They exist. They exist. They're just not in real life. They just don't have access. It's unfortunately, but Sorkin made a lot of fantastic. He I remember him saying through this character. I had a scene with Brad on a private plane, of course, and at one point I say, something like, you'd be hard pressed to find any liberals on the boards of any of these networks or what am I saying? Like the corporations that own movie studios and everything. Look, they're all capitalists. They're kind of apolitical in a sense.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating to be able to hear that, and it makes total sense to me. Anyway, I'm crabbing on and on.
No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's because I'm a fan of pretty much every show Sorkin has done, and I mean, if nothing else, what I have seen anyway in the last 5 years, I would say, is because the Newsroom came in for. I mean, you talk about the barrage that Studio 60 came under. I would say the Newsroom took even more than that.
Yeah, it's yes. However, it was, my opinion is that by virtue of the kind of show it was, or rather what this show was about, Newsroom was about anything. Newsroom was about what was actually happening in terms of any critical barrage,
yes,
right?
That's true.
Mean, it was about news under fire. Studio 60 was not about that.
Yeah.
It should have been about the workings of this TV show, and then whatever political machinations are.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the show is like a stick pin in time, because that's like, in the midst of the Iraq War and everything. I mean, to me, that's what makes it fascinating, is like, if that show were made today, it would be an entirely different thing. So we're talking about shows being sort of rooted to their time. I mean, Studio 60 is that. It's about, because like I said, I show the pilot, twice a year in class for the last more than 10 years at this point.
How is it responded to? How is it received?
They love it, and the best, I'll tell you, to me, first of all, I've seen it so many times, I could do dinner theater of just performing every role. I've seen it so many times. But when it ends, they're like, we want to watch the next episode. Where can we watch the next episode? Almost without exception. Well,
it's funny to me that classically structured art works.
Right.
And people, I think, frequently think they need to reinvent it, and I don't think you have to. Even people whose attention spans are split and compartmentalized, like mine is, and like everybody else's, because of technology. I learned this lesson when I was driving I have two teenage boys, and I would drive them to school, and in the morning I would listen to classic radio on Sirius XM or something, and frequently Dragnet was on.
Oh, sure.
And here we were, I want to say my 11 and my 9 and 11-year-old or my 11 and 13-year-old kids who would not get out of the car until the Dragnet episode was finished.
Wow.
Because the classic structure and, of course, the brilliant delivery, and that show is actually kind of great. I'm talking about the radio show.
Yeah.
It so captured us that it put the lie to anybody thinking that that's old-fashioned or needs to be rejiggered or reimagined. No, the classical stuff works, and so in many, so that's why I asked how Studio 60 was received, because even though that's maybe it's 10 years old or whatever it is, culturally people have shifted so far away from that I always wonder if it does work, and I'm not surprised that.
I think this is just my. My read of them is, granted, the first 2 minutes are oh, it's George Bush. I don't think kids realize it's George Bush. I think we're far enough away from that. And it's, the reason that they were fired was because of the war and everything else. I don't think they're plugging into that stuff at all.
Right.
I think it's the dynamics of the character, and I think I'd like to believe, and maybe this is just hopelessly optimistic, I think they're appreciating, here are intelligent characters speaking intelligently.
Right. Yeah. Look, language isn't dead. It's just not being used. You know, it's I'm a huge fan of Paddy Chayefsky, and I watch Network a lot, and also the movie The Hospital, if you've ever seen that, and it's chock full of really juicy, delicious language, and these actors are chewing it up, and it's quite fascinating. It is like Shakespeare. It forces you to adjust the way you're enjoying that particular movie or TV show. You can't be passive. You have to actively define some of what's being said until you understand the pace and the rhythm and the intention, and then you're along for the ride, and you can't escape loving it. I mean, that's what happens with really great writing.
Yeah. Well, now we mentioned how you've made this pivot where you found a rich vein of kind of skeezy political types to play. And so as we wrap things up, you played Doug Hamilton on NCIS, and it occurs to me that you're playing opposite Scott Bakula. You guys started on NBC together. You were both on at the same time, and this is such a total fanboy question, but is he cool?
Yes, Zachy, he's cool. He's really tall and really nice. And he'll give you $1 if you, just for being a good guy. He's a great guy. He's so cool. He's not only is he very versatile actor, but he takes being number one on the call sheet seriously. And when you're the star of a show, it doesn't mean you're the boss, but you're the most visible face of the show. And with that comes, you have the option of being kind of a schmuck, or being a ne'er-do-well, or being fun, or just collecting the money, or you can be humble. You can set a tone for the production, which is constructive and enthusiastic, and he does that. He does that. He's so supportive. He never takes the lazy route. He's a real advocate, not only for the crew and the actors, but for the show itself. And so he's everything you want your hero to be, and he's that. He's a great guy, and he's light, and he's funny, and he can, and he's so supportive of me when I was on that show. I mean, my character's in prison. I hope he'll come out at some point.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had a blast, and we definitely both acknowledge that we have been around way past our expiration dates. And look, I originally saw him in this play called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down, which was him, John Kassir, and an actor-writer named Jerry Coker, and it's about stand-up comedians. And this was in the mid-'80s.
John Kassir, the Crypt Keeper John Kassir? Wow.
Yes. John Kassir. And who I worked with on a film called Reefer Madness, and we got really close. And Scott is a song and dance man. You know, he can do this stuff. And I keep saying, man, you gotta break out of this, the Sheriff Pride or whatever. You gotta your NCIS stuff. Cause people got to see. And he's like, no, one thing at a time. Take it easy. He's Dwayne Pride now. I just want to blow it. But yeah, he's a great dude.
It's something. I love the CBS sort of procedural machinery that they have there, where you find like a beloved TV star who people know from decades, and you just plug them in, and you've got a show that you can hang them on. I mean, Mark Harmon on the original. It's a brilliant approach for just the. I mean, there's a reason people watch these shows.
Well, between that and other franchises like Law and Order and stuff, to me those are slightly updated versions of what we were talking about, classical structure.
Yeah.
And it works. It works. People come back to it like crazy. And I always thought if you took shows that were struggling on smaller stations or networks or cable networks and you threw it on to a major network, people would flock to it. I mean, think about it. I mean, I always thought if The Sopranos, which was very, very popular, but when you look at their numbers were very low compared to, if you put that on NBC at 10 p.m. and let it run as is, without, even if you wanted to cut back on a little bit of the violence and sex and all that stuff, people would go bananas over it because it's great writing. And there's a classical structure. People will follow it. They don't have to have their art chopped into little bite-sized chunks like texts or tweets or any of that stuff. Wow. They're still able to sit and watch that stuff. It's not just old people that sit and watch NCIS.
Yeah. Wow, I got to say, we covered a whole lot of ground, and that I could not be more thrilled because again, you are somebody whose work I've admired. Since I was a kid. Like I said, Wings started when I was in 7th grade.
Wow. Well, I'm glad I could help you through what is clearly a very troubled childhood.
Well, I do want to mention real quick before I let you go that you are also you make voice appearances on my friend Sean Coyle's show, Puppy Dog Pals.
Puppy Dog Pals. And I don't play authoritative dickheads in suits.
See that?
Isn't that great?
So
thank you so much.
Yeah, no, this was such a blast, Stephen. Thank you for spending the hour with me. Is there anything else that you have coming up that you want to let the audience know about?
Well, sure. I'm doing the second season of Get Shorty, which stars Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd, and that can be found on Epix, EPIX. And it is a great show. Again, it's kind of not seen by as many people as should see it. It's got amazing writing and acting. It's a fantastic show. I'll be in this season of Ballers, playing yet another dick in a suit. But you get to work with The Rock, which is thrilling and frightening. And because he could pull me apart like a boiled chicken if he so felt, and nobody would. They'd say, "Oh, he pulled another actor apart." Okay, just don't. So there's that. I recently shot a movie directed by Richard Shepard, who's one of the directors of the show Girls, that in fact stars Allison Williams of Get Out. So that's going to be coming out. That's a film called The Perfection. And what else? And I'm around like crazy. I'm just doing real journeyman acting stuff.
You have been a regular presence on our screens for 3 decades at this point, and I hope that's going to continue for a long time to come. I hope people who are listening to this and who have not seen Wings will seek it out, because it is on Hulu right now, and it is, as Stephen said earlier, it's an evergreen show. It is still extremely good. It is still extremely funny, and it's always worth watching. So, Steven Weber, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me pontificate. Great. Take care. Have a good day. You bet. Bye-bye, Zachy. Thanks so much, man. Bye-bye. Once again, big thanks to my guest, Steven Weber, for coming in and hanging out with us for the full hour here on Nostalgia Theater. I am just geeking out. This was such a thrill for me, and I am confident that you enjoyed hearing it as much as I enjoyed just being a part of it. Now, before we wrap things up, I did want to share a brand new review that we got for the show on iTunes, and this is from Darth Hawkeye, who says, Zachy, wanted to drop you a line to let you know how impressed I was with your interview of Mike Farrell, BJ Honeycutt himself. So this is a couple episodes ago, but I hope if you haven't heard it yet, I hope you'll dig back into the archives and check it out. I was amazed and heartened to find that Mr. Farrell was as warm and intelligent as the character he played for 8 years. And you, sir, were an expert interviewer balancing insightful questions with obvious but not over-flattering fandom. Thank you and Mr. Farrell for a wonderful hour of thought-provoking podcasting. Well, thank you so much for that. And if you are listening to this and you're moved to write a review, please do so. Go to iTunes and leave a review or a star rating. Either one is fine. Either one is helpful. So please do that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do that as well. If you have any questions or comments above and beyond that, you can email us, moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast. You can also find me at my website, Zacky'sCorner.com. That's ZAKIS Corner. That's also my Twitter. That's also my Instagram. And I love hearing from you. So please let me know if there's anything you'd like me to cover on future installments of the Nostalgia Theater Show. With that, I'm going to put a pin in this episode, but we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.